Okay, hello everyone. This is the Yellow Belt course. The module is 6S in Visual Management at RW Lyle, part of the Lyle Business System. Okay, so what we're going to go over first is Introduction to 6S. For those of you who are watching this presentation at Lyle, we're going to go offline, talk a little bit about previous efforts and current activities. We're going to review the 6S checklist, review the score tracker, and we're going to talk about auditing methods if you're in the audit or training class. Okay, so the question is, what is 6S? Well, there's basically Japanese words, and cleverly translated to English comes out closely to sort, which is to get rid of whatever doesn't add value, straighten whatever's left and does add value, deep clean the area, so it's called scrub, standardize both your cleanup routine and your operating methods, sustain the environment and sustain the gains that you achieve, and to consider safety in all of the things that you do and all the way you structure your workplace and your practices. Okay, so why do 6S? To create a clean, sanitary, pleasant, and safe working environment, to greatly improve employee morale and motivation, to eliminate various kinds of waste by minimizing the need to search for tools, making operators' jobs easier, reducing physically strenuous work, and freeing up space. So we saw in the previous module on Introduction to Lean, we defined what waste is in a lean environment, talked about different types of waste, non-value added. So this is one of the foundational tools that we're going to use to address those issues. One of the things that we want to get out of 6S is to find abnormalities, including rejects, excess inventory, and also dangerous conditions. We'll talk a little bit about that later. We want to reduce wasteful motion by organization of the area. We want to be able to visually identify the problems and be able to solve them. And we want to reduce accidents. Okay, so the first S stands for sort out. So in order to do this, you need to understand the difference between value-added and non-value-added activities. Okay, what you do is you may start out with something called a red tag campaign. So obviously, you go into an area, people are used to working a certain way, having a certain amount of things around them. And you're going to go in with this strict definition of value-added and non-value-added. Whatever's non-value-added, you're going to red tag it. You may not be ready to dispose of it yet, but you're going to flag it for disposal. So you tag everything that looks disorderly or unsafe, especially. But beyond that, anything that you can't see adds value, like right now or very soon. The idea in this phase is to be ruthless. 9 out of 10 times you'll be right. And the 1 out of 10 times you get rid of something that you actually did need, the company will probably survive. So in the big picture, it's better to err on the side of clearing the area out. If you're in doubt, throw it out. If still in doubt, send the red tags to a red tag area for resolution. There are some areas, some companies who've never done this before end up removing truckloads of items. Massive amounts of non-value-added waste is removed from the areas. Okay, now moving on to what's left, if you get rid of all the non-value-added, what's left is value-added. So then you have to think about and map out how you do your process, list step by step or diagram how you do the work. And then make sure that the physical area represents the best way of doing the theoretical process. Okay, so you're organizing what belongs. Create a place for everything. It's the old saying, create a place for everything and everything in its place. Of course, you have to deal with the open red tags from the first step, which by that time you have a cross-functional team. You may have accounting, you may have inventory control involved, operations, sales. There may be slow-moving inventory. You have special deals to, get rid of obsolete, things that are bordering on obsolete. You may have scrap dealers come in. You may sell off your unused equipment. A lot of different ways are used to disposition the red tags from the first step. Okay, so the other thing that you want to do is resolve unsafe condition, or organize parts and materials, resolve the things that you're afraid to throw out in the first step, and write off obsolete materials. Okay, so as you're going through your steps to organize what's left over, this is kind of a model cell with all the different tools and techniques that you'd use. And you can see them here listed on the right. Identification of the area, processes, resources, and products, identification of the team who works in the area. Sometimes in some circumstances, you have these little stenciled footprints on the floor showing where people should stand or what path they should walk in. Communication and break areas, technical areas where you could go for visual resources and information, tool boards, visual documentation, including standard operating procedures and that sort of thing. You may have visual production control, which could be either a board, it could be a computer terminal that everyone could look at, it could be overhead monitors, something that provides status. You want to post your maintenance schedule, so that's transparent. You want everybody to know what the maintenance status of all the equipment is. You want to identify all the raw material and work in process. That's critically important for most people's quality system. You should never have unidentified parts in a work area. Okay, or not having the status of the parts identified. Visual quality control. So what are your monitoring signals for your machines? Do you have SPC charts? Do you have records of problems and defects? Okay, and those should all be at the point of use where people can get to them and utilize them easily. Okay, you should post your metrics and your key objectives. You should always have transparency of what are your goals in the area, what are your objectives, and what are your current results. Okay, you also want to track your ongoing continuous improvement activities so people have awareness of that. And your project list and any sort of mission statement should also be visible to people. Okay, so here's a few examples of organization. We're going to have these scattered throughout the presentation. Cable ties. So you can see that every single cable tie is neatly arranged in a plastic bin, and it's labeled for what item number it is. And you can see the labels are in two places, so that if the plastic tube is gone, you know what plastic tube was supposed to be in that spot. And it seems very silly, right? But how much more silly is it for an item like this to shut down a production process where and costing you thousands and thousands of dollars of revenue over an item like this? So a lot of the time, you don't want the tail to wag the dog. So these are really good things, really easy to organize, and the benefit is much larger than you would think just by looking at it. Okay, here's an example in a warehouse, and you can see all the wiring is identified. A couple deficiencies here. Usually when we do shelving systems, the best thing to do is put little dividers between the materials, because they could tend to shift back and forth, and then it becomes vague which is which. Or on the other hand, somehow have a label on the material that matches up with the label on the shelf, and then it would be a complete visual system. So this is kind of like 3/4 of the way there, not quite there. Okay, now S3 is scrub and shine, and that's one of the most misunderstood parts of 6S. Everyone understands, you get stuff out of the area you don't need. Everyone understands you organize things. When it comes to scrub and shine, people have a very superficial understanding of it. And what I like to teach is, it's not just for the environmental, it's not just for the aesthetics, it's not just so that the boss is happy. What you're mostly doing is you're cleaning so you can detect abnormalities. A couple of examples. In our building, most everything that we have that uses any kind of fluid in it, we try to paint the equipment white. Why do we paint it white? because you could see dust on the equipment, and if you have a white piece of equipment, it's always standing out. Well, yeah, I mean, it forces us to keep it clean, but if you have a white surface, you're going to see a leak before it could cause any engine damage, before it could cause any damage to motors or, physical elements of the equipment. You see frayed wires quickly. You see, dial indicators better. So really that's what it's for. It's so that you could detect abnormalities of whatever's left. And so it's critical to maintain your environment this way as an early warning system for problems that could become larger. So you want to make the work area absolutely clean, equipment, floors, walls, and this is where you look for problems. You look for leaks in air hoses, which can be obscured when things are filthy. You look for loose or missing items, which can be obscured when things are filthy. Unsafe condition, frayed wires is a really big thing. Causes of messes or problems. So the more you clean, you start to find the root cause of the mess. And what you want to do is you don't want to be constantly cleaning. You want to find the root cause and eliminate it so you don't have to clean. And that level of improvement requires you to get beyond the surface. And you want to find quality issues before they occur. And some of these quality issues are things that are obscured by dirt, but it could also be caused by dirt. You could also have issues where things become contaminated. So that's why S3 is a very critical part of the overall visual management process. Okay, and in all this, what we want to do is we want to look at the root cause of any problems that we come across and then take corrective action. We're very big on prevention. Okay, here's an example of what I'm talking about. This goes beyond, the regular concept of success is just keep the surface clean. But a better way of doing it is look at the piece of equipment from the point of view that you want to be able to detect any abnormality. And in some cases, what that means is extra transparency. So you actually, would cut out and make visible all the parts of the equipment, that you could see things, you could see small defects occurring before it becomes a bigger problem that's obscured from everyone's view. Okay, so here's a smaller example. It's just, a clean lunchroom. So yeah, there's aesthetics and, and health involved too. You're not going to get sick if you're eating in a cleaner lunchroom. Okay, now to keep things clean, you want to make sure that you have all your supplies. So it's also very important to apply 6S to your cleaning system and your cleaning supplies, and make sure that you have everything that you need to achieve the level of cleanliness that you want. Okay, and then the last one is safety. So we want to make the workplace safer. And what do we mean by this 6S? What we want to do is look for unsafe conditions, look for the potential for unsafe acts. So we're talking about machine guarding, that kind of thing. Are machines up to OSHA standards? Have we really thought out every possible opportunity that someone can get something wrong and actually get hurt doing it? If it's hard to tell, look for difficult tasks. Try the job yourself. And then you could kind of get a feel of it and tell where is it that you could get hurt in the job. Look for like possible repetitive injuries, neck strains, awkward motions, that sort of thing. Then you, as you audit, as you analyze these things, you list the opportunities and you resolve them. Okay, so here's one example of safety is and 6S is that you want to have an organized and stocked first aid kit. You want to have your eye washes where it's applicable. You want to have your chemicals. You want to have your showers where it's applicable to wash chemicals off if you get splash. So you want to have all these things in place and really give some thought to what's in that first aid kit. Okay, lockout tagout is a very, very important thing in most industrial environments. And what is that? It's actually a lot simpler than it seems at first. You have some instructions, but the basic concept is this. You have a set of locks. Anybody in the organization who works with the equipment or has the minimal amount of knowledge, anybody is authorized to lock out a machine if there's a dangerous condition. But only a trained and skilled maintenance person or engineer is allowed to remove the tag when the when the safety issue has been resolved. So what's the idea of this? Well, it's if something goes wrong on the first shift, or with one operator becomes aware of something, you want to lock the machine down so that some other operator can't come along either on the current or the next shift and accidentally try to run it without the safety issue being resolved. Second, you don't want somebody to accidentally run something when a maintenance person is in the middle of doing their job and then somebody gets hurt, killed, electrocuted, killed, cut, burned, whatever. So it's a very important process, and every company has its own standards and its own specific ways of doing it. Okay, the next aspect is personal protective equipment, and that's very important. And one thing that we do in all of our areas is we do a job hazard analysis where we look at the specifics of each operation, determine the proper training, preventive measures, but we also look at the right personal protective equipment, and then we specify that in our work instructions and our standard work. So some types of personal protective equipment that are common are ear protection, aprons, to protect from dust and small splashes and things of that sort. Eye protection is very important, and it's mandatory in most factories. Respirators are important wherever there's fumes or anything that could affect your lungs. Gloves are an interesting thing. You want to have gloves in some circumstances to protect yourself from cuts, but there are certain instances, and you have to be aware of this, where you have spinning equipment, you may have a drill press, you may have like a mill. There's certain instances where you actually don't want gloves because they could become caught in the equipment and cause you to mangle or break your fingers, break your hand. So you just got to be aware of what you're doing. And of course, you have to have proper footwear. Steel-toed boots are very common in a lot of industrial environments. Okay, and this is just some other images, different types of gloves, different types of safety equipment that are available. Okay, so standardizing. What do we mean when we're talking about standardizing? What that means is to assign, in 6S, it means to assign tasks and manage visually. Who will do what to keep the area clean, safe, and orderly? Agree on daily and weekly tasks. Establish a visual management system for those tasks. And the benchmark to tell if you're successful is, can you tell at a glance if the tasks have been done? So you have a check sheet. You look down the check sheet, tell immediately who's done their cleaning tasks. If you have a operator preventive maintenance sheet, you can look down that sheet, tell exactly which PMs have been done and which ones haven't been done. So we want to be proactive and maintain the system that way. Okay, we also want to standardize repetitive work. So that gets into a whole other topic. The next module is going to be about standard work. But just a little preview of it, you have your job instructions. You have critical points where you're talking about, okay, use caution. There's something you need to be aware of that affects safety. Or you may have something that affects quality, or you may have something that you just need to pay attention because it's a best practice. So those are the things that are common, and you can see here they also talk about personal protective equipment, and other information like that. Then you have graphics showing how you do the work and what the work elements are. Okay, so we want to standardize workmanship. So there's a lot of different ways of diagramming what your workmanship requirements are, because not everything is as straightforward as just dimensional inspection. Sometimes you have aesthetics, and then you need to have different ways of describing what your standards are. Okay, you want to standardize your cleanup activities, and a lot of you guys, if you've been to a restroom at a well-run operation, at a fast food place or wherever, you'll see that they have a checklist in the restroom, and those restrooms are often cleaner than others. So you divide the area into zones. If it's a large enough area, you define the repetitive cleanup tasks, define the frequency, the person assigned, then you leave a couple spaces and you laminate the sheet, let them with dry erase, just mark what their initials are and the last date that they did the task. So this is how at a glance you can walk up and you can tell the status of the area. Okay, so the other part of sustaining, there's a couple of aspects of sustaining. The first thing is keeping it up. You audit and you just have to be pesky. So you develop audit checklists for the office and the shop floor. Assign the audit role to somebody outside the area for obvious reasons. And you track the audit results. Try to have a little bit of a friendly competition, and try to give some feedback, depending on what their scores are, what their trends are. And then hold yourselves accountable for sustaining the system. Okay, so some of the insights. Well, in some companies, it's difficult to implement housekeeping programs like 6S because people think, that really all they're measured on is, what some people call getting the wash out, just getting the product out. That's all that people care about. They know we care about getting the product out the door. They know that second after that, we care about keeping the costs down. Things like, housekeeping and cleanliness and, other aspects of lean, they think are kind of superfluous to what they're doing. But it's not. Only if you understand 6S superficially. If you understand it as something that improves your productivity because you're not looking for tools, because you're able to see problems with your equipment before it becomes a bigger problem and shut you down, because you have everything standardized and you have routines so that you could focus your intelligence on other things. If you do all those things, obviously you're going to have better numbers. So that's something that's very important to explain to people and have them understand. You have to explain what's in it for them and what's in it for the company before they'll take something like this seriously. Basic 6S is the first step in building a new culture. Why? Because it's the discipline of controlling your environment. So if we're trying to set up a Kanban system, how are you going to set up a Kanban system if you can't control your cards, if you can't control your physical space, your location, if you can't make sure the same box is put back in the same place every time? So 6S is what we'd call a foundational discipline before we start adding, the more sophisticated things like pull systems or, even some sorts of standard work or production leveling. You need to be able to control your physical environment and have the physical manifestation of your area be what you planned it to be and what you designed it to be. Okay, the other insight is in order to get people to do this, you have to lead by example. You have to have your own office pretty clean. You have to, or if not, you have to be continually improving it. You have to be, audited. And you have to be persistent. This is a very easy program to just fall off and have people just, think it's a flavor of the month, and it can't be that because it's the foundation of everything else. So it's okay to be persistent. It's okay to nag. You don't need to beat up on people, but just be very persistent and be consistent with the program, with the auditing and sustainment. Okay. So, assuming that you've mastered the fundamentals or you're comfortable with them and you're kind of on your way with 6S, then what comes next? What gets built on top of that? Well, the next step on top of that is something called visual management, visual workplace. So, what's visual management? Well, in a visual management system, everything has a clear and precise outcome. It's a work environment that's self-ordering, self-explaining, self-regulating, and self-improving. So in a way, it's like a physical work instruction that's at the point of use. An operator or an associate will go to the first step in the operation. The station itself will tell them what to do. The station itself will tell them what's the next thing they should do and what's the thing after that and what's the thing after that. They don't need to, wait around for a lead to micromanage everything that they do. So this is really when you're starting to establish the foundation of self-directing work teams. So it's a very powerful thing. And the way that you know it's working, because what's supposed to happen does happen on time, every time, day or night. So it doesn't matter what shift it is, doesn't matter if operators go from one place to the other. There's enough standardization and there's enough visual cues and signals and tools that they know exactly what they're supposed to do and they're able to do it. So visual management is simply managing a visual workplace. Okay, so what's a visual device? A visual device is a mechanism or thing intentionally designed to influence, direct, or limit behavior by making vital information available without speaking a word. So if you go to the same supermarket all the time, you always know where to go for your breakfast cereal, or the sign, or you get directed by signs to tell you where the breakfast cereal is. Should transmit a nonverbal message in 5 seconds or less. should tell us what we need to do, so they're action-based, and it should be at the point of use. So you may not see the direction until the time that you actually need it, so you don't get overloaded with information. A visual device translates data into information, information into meaning, and meaning into behavior. Okay, so here's some more examples that we're going to go through. This is an example of a visual communication center. So as the people are gathering together, they see key pieces of information that management wants them to know. These are an example of a plant metrics board. Okay, and again, some more examples. This is an example of a job status board. It's one of the simplest means of visual management. This is a standard work display. Okay, another example of communications boards and a very nice clean factory. This is an example in an administrative area, probably of a common work area where all the office supplies are laid out. So you can see if something's missing before you need it. Okay, this is an example of a 6S operation in an administrative area. And you can see this is an engineering operation, and they have blueprints. The blueprints begin at one end of the office, and they travel down a set of tables until they get to the other end. Now, these engineers who are sitting at these cubicles, they all represent different functions. And as the drawing goes to each function, they do their review. They'll either pass it backwards or it'll progress forward if it passes the review. So any manager, engineer, or interested party can walk through here, and they know exactly which stage, they know exactly what the status is of every drawing going through the engineering review process. Okay, a similar example is we have this cell for producing quotations, presumably for an insurance company. You start at one end, they receive a request for quotation, they go through a certain review process, there's something done on a computer, you can tell this is somewhat dated, and as they get to the other end, they print out their quote, and then they fax it to the recipient. So there's some things that are dated here, but you get the general idea of how a physical paperwork process would work. Okay, so here's a couple of other examples, and some of these are going to be kind of random, but here you started out with a dial indicator. But what do you have when you have a dial indicator? It doesn't really tell you that much. So you have the dial at a certain setting. How do you know what setting it should be at? So in this case, this visual tool, this visual indicator, was developed by showing an acceptable range. So it not only has the number of what the minimum pressure rating is, but it shows an acceptable range. And if it's outside the range, presumably you have to stop what you're doing and address something. Okay, this is an example of a shadow board. This is a very good system, and it's nice to have a board where you hang your tools. If you don't have the outline, you don't have a shadow board. That's something very important that we still emphasize here, because when the outline is empty, that tells you exactly what it is you're missing before you actually shut your line down because you don't have it. So this is for supervision to walk through, see if anything's missing, and replace any tools that are needed for production before it actually becomes a major issue. Okay, again, this is an example of making sure that all of your part numbers, no matter how silly or small they are properly identified, and we understand what the status of our inventory levels are. Okay, this is just another example of an information kiosk. Several different things are being presented there. Another one. Okay. And then, of course, you have your reference boards. You have your reference kiosks. People could walk over. If there's a frequently asked question, they could refer to these graphical work instructions, limit standards, especially when your standards are aesthetic and they're not dimension-based, where you could just easily use a print, or you use your prints with tolerances and measuring equipment. If it's something visual, you need a control sample to go off of. Okay, so another example, shoveling equipment. and you can see there's brooms, there's dustpans, anything that you need to maintain the area. Okay, now in some cases, regular shadow boards are, not feasible because you may have tools walking away, especially if you have multiple shifts. People tend to walk away with things. So if you can't have perfect transparency, the next best step is to put these, is to organize your actual toolbox. This is also very common in machine shops where people bring their own personal tools. We don't want to make them put their own personal tools on a shadow board and get them stolen. So, but we do want them to organize their own carts, so that when they need to find a tool, they're not wasting time, shuffling through a mess trying to find something. They could find what they need, get it really quick, and do the job that they need to do. Keep their productivity going. Okay, so here's another example. You can see we have the boundaries set out, but we also have several cautionary labels. So it's very important to have these standard OSHA compliant labels showing us, can somebody be electrically shocked, like in this case? Can somebody be burned? Can somebody be crushed? Can somebody be cut? So all those things are important to have, as well as having your boundaries, your outlines, and having everything organized. Okay, so this is an example of using visual management for inventory control or for pull system replenishment. Now in this case, obviously, when you get down to a yellow level, that means maybe there's an option to get something. There's a certain way you'd respond to that. Obviously, when it gets down to the red level, you have to order and expedite to keep from running out of parts. So you see you have a proactive system here where you're going to get some advance notice before you actually run out of something and shut down the assembly line. Okay, and then this is one of the more advanced techniques I was talking about before. It's something called a hijunka or a level loading box example. So what that does is you have whether you're using job orders or Kanban cards, you have the day blocked out by certain increments of time. So anyone who comes over to the area can tell at a glance where they are in line and about when their parts are going to be done processing. Okay, so that's another topic. We'll go a lot more deeper into that when we get to the lean scheduling topics. Okay, again, we want to know the status of our area. So there's a lot of different ways of having and-in signals and displaying where we are versus our plan. So at a certain time of the day, we should have a certain amount of production. Then we track the actual, and then we track the variance. And presumably we respond to the variances. Okay, like I was saying again, we have go, no-go examples. We have yes and no. So simple visual resources that you could use as mistake proofing. So obviously, when you see something like this, you know that what happened is that at some point somebody steamed something that was not supposed to be steamed. And as a result, somebody said, well, let's make sure that never happens again. They come up with a proactive board to display exactly which ones are which. And this is even better than a photograph. Having an actual physical example of good pieces and bad pieces is something that prevents a lot of mistakes in a manufacturing environment. Okay, so again, examples of no good samples, limit samples, that kind of thing, put together with other visual management tools. This is an example of a TPM schedule board, so this is just one way of doing that. Okay, so the conclusion is 6S is not just a housekeeping program, but a foundation for almost any type of continuous improvement effort. Thank you very much, and our next topic will be standard work.